Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. This week's featured author is Tyrean Martinson. Tyrean is a word hunter and language arts tutor and coach for students aged 12 to 92. She lives and writes in Gig Harbor, enjoys a full family life, and likes to daydream about life in rocket boots or flying on griffins. She's the author of a fantasy trilogy and a science fiction novella series for young adult readers, and writes poems, short stories, song lyrics, and nonfiction articles for all ages. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me we have Tyrean Martinson. Tyrean, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I am fabulous. A little tired, but that's normal. That's normal. Yeah. So we're here to talk today about your books. Yes, that's with an S. What books in particular are we talking about today?
I think we're talking about Liftoff and Nexus, my two sci-fi novellas that are in a series that, yes, I have yet to finish, but someday I will. So, yeah, I think mainly those two.
Okay. Can you tell us what these two books are about?
Well, in the first one, we meet Amaya, and she's just a regular 17-year-old young woman who's suffered some grief and loss, and she's at the movie theater with her friends on a summer afternoon, and it turns out that the movie theater is actually a spaceship in disguise. And
oh, shoot.
She gets to go on a bit of an adventure and discover that there's a reason why her mom always chose all of her schools and all of her friends. And there's a little bit more to her life than she knew.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
For some reason, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came to mind. For I don't know why, just all of a sudden that kind of proponent of, all right, now here's what the world really like. Enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just came to mind. So what inspired you to get into writing sci-fi?
I think watching Star Wars at the age of 6. I can't believe my parents actually took me to the movie theater, but they did. And yeah, I think that was probably the beginning, but also I had teachers read sci-fi and fantasy stories at school, and that was helpful too, to really get into that genre. And I also read a lot of fairy tales when I was a kid, which that may seem more like fantasy, but I feel like sci-fi and fantasy are pretty closely linked.
Yeah, I think they're like, I've talked to some people who get really down in the nitty gritty. Science fiction is more when you're talking about technology, but I mean, technology can be, there's going to be monsters in fantasy. Well, technically, if it's on a different planet, it can be sci-fi. So there's a gray area there. So I don't know.
Yes.
I'm with you. Sci-fi fantasy is all kind of the same ish to me as well. How long have you been writing that particular story for?
I wrote the first 4 chapters back in 2014, and it became one of those things just went into my file folders and I forgot until 2020.
Oh, wow.
And then I raced through the first book. Like in 1 month, I finished it. I had an editing friend. I asked her if she'd edit it. She had some time. So it was a very fast process with the first book. Second book took me a year. Third book, it's been a year and a half, and I don't feel like it's ready. It's just, there's something about it that's not quite working for me. And yeah, I will get it done, but not today.
I mean, would that be something where you need a second pair of eyes or even a third pair of eyes to kind of maybe help you out? Or is that just something you have to stew on for a while?
Well, I have used the stew on method now for a little while, and I think I'm ready for another pair of eyes. So I will be seeking out a couple of really trusted alpha readers for that project.
Sometimes someone can just say a word or a phrase and you're like, oh, I have an idea now. And just that, external inspiration, it always helps in some regard, whether it was on purpose or not.
Yeah,
was
true.
On purpose or not. Yeah. So what kind of feedback have you gotten from the books you've gotten out so far?
Well, for those two, I've had some really great feedback from people who've said that they were surprised at how much world building I was able to stuff into a novella size book, and that it's pretty imaginative. Yeah. I think the most surprising feedback I've received is from my 83-year-old father-in-law, who loves it and thinks it's my first one in that series is my best book.
Oh, wow.
He's like, wow, how do you think of this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. I ask what if questions. That's it.
Let your imagination run wild a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's a novella. How many pages is it?
That always depends on the font and everything. So it's somewhere between 120 and 150 pages. It's about 30,000 words. The first one and the second one is 33,000 words. The third one will be a little bit longer.
A lot faster than a novel. A lot faster to get through writing wise. Not to mention reading wise, but writing wise, I found myself getting it done a lot faster. And sometimes it's easy to consume for people. They see a book that's 300-400 pages. They're like so intimidated. Oh, 120, 150. I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. So a little more inviting for some folks who are a little more timid. So when you're writing, so sci-fi, did you have to do any kind of research, like to make it scientifically somewhat sort of accurate? Or is it just more or less, this is how it's going to be in my world and no one can change that?
I started down a road of doing research about space travel, and I quickly decided that was just a long rabbit trail for me, and that actually no sci-fi show or book out there has really truly answered it, because we don't actually have faster than light travel. So I just created this is how it works in my world, and just went with it. And same with a lot of the alien life and even like breathing the atmosphere and things like that. I kind of went a little more space opera like Star Trek, where, they get off the ship and they could just breathe the atmosphere. No big deal,
It makes it a little easier to write, I imagine, too.
Yes. Yeah.
So for your character names, how many characters do you have? A ballpark, because I know sometimes you can have a huge amount.
I struggle with having huge amounts. I think I have 8 named characters who I think are fairly important in the series. There's really 2 that are the main characters, but 8 who are really important to the storyline and the plot. And then of course I have other people running around, and
of course
you've got the spaceship pilot and the security guy and all those kind of people running around.
Yeah, the secondary characters who kind of add some personality to the mix and some help with the world building a bit.
Yeah, they do. In the series, basically the idea is that aliens have come to Earth before in disguise. We just haven't realized it, and it's where we get all of our mythology from. So there's dryads and elves and pixies and dragons and will-o-wisps, but they don't call themselves will-o-wisps. But anyway, and so it's I just was having fun playing around with. It's definitely a mix of science and fantasy.
So for your character names, did you have a hard time coming up with the names, or how did that process look?
I do this interesting process where I will write down people's names at the end, at the end of the movies where you have the scrolling credits. I'll write down names that I think are interesting, and then I'll look them up, figure out if I think they mean what I kind of want them to mean for certain characters. And sometimes I'll take 2 names and split them together. So Amaya was actually Amaris and Rhea, but it became Amaya. So
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've always taken like whatever major proponent, either of their personality, their destiny, something they encounter, and I look up like names for this, and I kind of pick and choose from that. Is always how I've done it. But that's a new one. I've never heard of movie credit. There's a lot of different names out there that are just a little staggering to me. So that's a new way to do it.
Well, if you watch Marvel movies and you watch that, you want to watch that end scene that's after the credits, you have to sit through all the credits. So I'm like, well, what do I do with this time? Okay, I could look at names.
I just always talk through it with whoever I'm watching the movie with. That's a good way to spend your time, and you're being productive. You're getting names for future books. So, any favorite book or books that inspired you to get into science fiction or writing at all?
Definitely. I think one of my first favorite fantasy stories was The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. It was read to my third grade class by our teacher, and then one of my cousins gave me a copy of the book, and I read through it and then read through it again, and I kept reading it. And anyway, I read other books, but when I was in sixth grade, we had a little short story contest, and my story didn't win, but that was fine. The teacher was really encouraging, and she told me that, I could write novels someday. And I was like, really? I could, like, and I'm pretty sure she meant it to be an encouragement she'd probably give to most of the kids in the classroom. But I took it as like, wow, I could write novels. And so it became a really important thing to me. So as far as science fiction, I think the first science fiction story I really liked was Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which I know that a lot of people don't like him as much as an author anymore, but I just fell in love with that book when I read it. So yeah, that was, as far as sci-fi reads go, that was my first real love of sci-fi reading. And before that, all the science fiction I liked was space opera, like Star Trek and Star Wars. And
Read it in books, or is it all video based?
both. I'd read and watched.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because it's the lore is elaborate. I don't know much, but I've got friends who are just deep diving into it. Like, which book is this now? Oh, this is in this chapter of this person's life or in this era here. I'm like, okay, you've lost me. You lost me. It's fascinating. I'm glad that they have those for people who love it, but I've never gotten into it that deep before. What do you think makes a good story?
I think a character who has a problem and that you really want them to solve, and the character has to be compelling somehow. And I honestly, I don't always know what that magic thing is. Like, why was Bilbo Baggins so important to me when I was 8 or 9 years old? I mean, and he's a 50-year-old hobbit, but the fact that he was so reluctant to go on this adventure, and yet he went anyway, and he still bumbled around and didn't know what he was doing, and he eventually figured it out. Somehow that made it a compelling narrative.
Yeah.
I think a lot of flaws make for compelling characters, and then a lot of trouble, I guess.
It definitely makes the events more exciting. That's for sure. That's for sure. Little conflict, it never hurts. I've read books where there's too much conflict, like you've done too much to the characters. Like, this is too much abuse. Why are we doing this? So I mean, is that something you think about too? Is like the realism? I mean, it's obviously fiction, but you kind of think of the realism with it.
Yeah, I struggle with that, because even though Liftoff and Nexus, they sound very kind of spoofy, because there's honestly some humorous elements in them, and the fact that there are these aliens that come from mythological type backgrounds. Yes, but at the same time, there are a couple of fist fights in there, and there's some shooting, and there are some deaths, and it, like, how do you deal with all of that without having a certain level of seriousness in there, and at the same time not go too far, because there's really a dance, I think, with that. Like, I don't want to write gore, and I also don't want to write stuff that depresses people. So how to show a character dealing with hard things, but yet not just be in a rotten place.
So what's one of your weird writing quirks? You got any of those?
Yes, definitely. I like to write on more than one project a week. And that's
man,
a really strange thing. I know that a lot of people are very linear, and they like to have one project and that's it. They're just going for it. When I do that, I hit about, I don't know, like 15 to 18,000 words, and I'll just stop. And true, you can take like 2 or 3 weeks to write 15 to 18,000 words. But I mean, when I stop like that, I'll just stop hard, and I won't have any idea where to go from there. I'll be like, I hit a wall, and that's it. The characters are just standing there. And so, but if I change it up and I do, like right now, I have the novella that I keep trying to revise. I have a fantasy serialization on Kindlevella, and I have a nonfiction thing that I'm writing, and I just switch up from one to the other, like every couple days. and that makes me happy. And I can just keep on working, and I don't seem to hit that wall.
Wow, that's awesome. I cannot do that. I've tried, I've broken away a little bit to go to some other project, but it just doesn't really get traction. Maybe some notes, but as for like legit, word count, it's almost I have to stay linear. So more props to you for getting more work done, that's for sure. Oh my gosh. Before we started, you talked about, or I asked you about other works that you've done. Can you go into that real fast for us?
Other works that I've done?
Yeah, other writing projects you've done.
Yeah, I write short stories. I write poetry. I have a fantasy trilogy that I wrote a while ago, and I have the series on Kindlevella is actually linked to my old fantasy trilogy. It's in the same world.
Okay.
So I didn't have to go back and recreate a bunch of world building for that. The short stories are what I do with all my random ideas that I don't think I want to turn into novels, but I want to play with for just a moment. And the poetry is something I never expected to write, but one of my teachers encouraged me, so I tried it. And now I write poetry pretty often, like usually at least 3 or 4 mornings a week. I'll start off with some poetry.
Okay.
And I recently received second place for the Lake Wold Poetry in the Gardens contest,
Nice.
which is really exciting and awesome.
I learned your writing quirk, but do you have any writing kryptonite? What just kills the mood for writing for you?
I hate to call it a kryptonite type thing, but if I take vacation, I'm on vacation.
Okay.
Like I always think to myself, oh, it'd be cool if I did research or something like that when I've traveled, but nope. I might write in my journal, but I am not writing anything else. It's just
No.
I just
Yeah.
turn off I just soak stuff in and don't put stuff out.
I think that's healthier anyway. I don't think you doing it 24/7. Well, yeah, you're thinking about ideas, writing notes here, that's fine, whatever. Put a pin in it, but just doing it all the time, especially when you're going to have fun and play and relax, you got to give yourself a mental break or you're just going to burn out hard.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say, so basically there's kind of like the two ends of the spectrum, like vacation, definitely not writing. And unfortunately, about 4 or 5 years ago, I had some serious illness and did not write. I just sat and read really easy books over and over again and rested. So there wasn't much going on creativity wise.
Well, that's good that you took time for you, because you should really do that with your mental health, physical health. You got to do that, and if because writing takes it out of you. Writing is hard. I know for me, it energizes me, but it's also exhausting. It's a very odd dichotomy. I don't know how does it work for you?
I would say the same for me. It's energizing, exhausting, and it also takes a massive amount of concentration. I might be able to write in a coffee shop because sometimes I'll just kind of like the noise level kind of create I don't know, that
Like
nice
droning
white
sound?
noise background. I can't write to music with lyrics. I guess that's my other writing kryptonite. Music with lyrics. I'm just hearing the lyrics and I start writing them down without even knowing I'm doing it. I'm like, okay, wait, no. Maybe classical music, but mostly just I need concentrated time.
Yeah. I am with you in that boat. I cannot have lyrics because it disrupts the rest of what's going on. Classical's about it. Sometimes I can't even have anything. I have to have dead silence, and even that sometimes is too loud.
Yeah.
So it's painful. So have you ever considered writing under a pseudonym?
Yes, and I do have a Kindlevella series under a pseudonym that
Really?
I'm not gonna mention it here, but
Okay.
it's an old story, and I thought I'd throw it out there and see if anybody liked it. So yeah.
And did anybody like it?
Yeah,
Oh,
a few
okay.
people.
That's
So
good.
that's been good. And it's just kind of fun to play around with. I sometimes think it would be easier to write under a pseudonym. I don't know why. Sometimes I think it would be easier to throw off any hindrances to creativity, like pleasing other people. But then I'm like, well, I still want people to read it. So then it has to be readable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you in your everyday life friends with other writers and authors?
Yeah, I am. I have a really good writing group here in Gig Harbor. There are 5 ladies. We all just get together every other week if we can. If we can't, we will exchange via email and give each other a little bit of feedback and encouragement. It's a good group. And
Good.
then I've been a part of some online writing groups, and I'm a Realm Makers member, which means they have like an online forum, and then they have a writers conference every year. So
Oh,
I
okay.
joined them last year, and it was really awesome. It was the first time I'd been to a Christian speculative fiction conference. So it felt like the nerds of the nerds of the nerds, like writers of science fiction and fantasy who also are into faith stuff. It was, yeah, it's a pretty small niche group,
I
really.
was gonna say it's like a niche within a niche there.
Yeah, but there were 500 people there. So I mean, it was not
Wow.
small. There were people from Australia and Japan and yeah, all of the United
Wow.
States. It
Well,
was pretty
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's good that you can find, that niche to make friends,
Mhm.
contacts, network for helping with your stuff. I really enjoy connecting with authors. Clearly it's
Mhm.
one of my hobbies, passions nowadays. And I find that I'm learning something new from every single person. So really it's really priceless, honestly. Completely and utterly priceless. So as a writer, what was the best money you've ever spent?
I'm gonna go with going to the Realm Makers conference last year. That was honestly the biggest boost I've had in a really long time. It just,
By boost, what do you mean by boost?
I mean, encouragement, networking with people, meeting a lot of people who write similar things to what I write. And also, I get to meet with an agent and editor, and I've done that at other conferences, but it just felt like I connected a little bit more. And no, I didn't get a contract out of it, but I still felt like I had more opportunity. There were some, more steps taken than I'd had before at other conferences, but it was just it was a good experience. I liked
Nice.
it quite a bit. And
Yeah.
then other than that, I would say a commercial fiction class I took through the University of Washington years ago,
Okay. Okay.
like 20 years ago. So I've been trying this stuff for a while, but I mean, some of having small children was why I took a break, but some of it was just, yeah, doubt
Yep.
can kind of eat at you for a while.
It really can. That self-doubt it's terrible. It just sits there and kind of festers for a while, like, oh, I can't do this. No, I can't do this. And then you just gotta just kind of shoo it away. And then it's like, no, I'm gonna do it anyway. And we're
Mhm.
gonna try and have fun with it because otherwise it's just you're just gonna sit there and go nowhere.
Yeah,
That's just boring. We don't want to do that. Don't do
no,
that at all. So if you could look back at your younger self, what different little writing advice would you give yourself?
know that your story, it matters to you. Even if it doesn't to anybody else, keep writing and keep finishing things and keep sending things out there. Eventually something hits the wall and sticks. So
Were you an avid writer when you were younger, or just kind of as time permitted or the inspiration struck is when you kind of wrote down some good stuff?
I went after it for a little while when I was in middle school, and then I got embarrassed about my writing and hid it for a long time. And then basically in my 20s and 30s, it was kind of an off and on thing. Like inspiration would strike and I'd write really hard for a while and then I'd stop. And then, yeah, kind of back and forth. And when I had little kids, that was definitely a good time to write short stories and poetry. Like, it's a good time to just stick to those short, what you could write in 15-minute thing
Oh,
times.
yep. I
For me,
wish I could.
anyway.
Yeah, I wish I had that capability. Mine's just a big, huge thing. And I tried writing short stories. I've got a couple, but the big story is just always lingering there. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it is for you, especially with your science fiction. But you said you wrote a fantasy series too.
That's a fantasy trilogy. It's a very Christian fantasy trilogy. And so sometimes, uh, yeah, there's a very small audience for that. And I loved writing it. And the idea for it came out of a dream I had, which is really strange. That is not where I normally get my ideas, but that's where I got the idea for that one. And I think one of the fun things about it is one of my daughters actually drew the first cover for it because it took me 7 drafts to get through that book and feel like it was good enough. Anyway, so she drew like this hand drawn with, color crayons type picture for the front cover many years ago when I still call it the Crystal Sword. It's not called that anymore. It's called Champion in the Darkness, but
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's good. So what's that one? What's the plot line on that? Just a real quick summation.
Clara is the youngest sword guard trainee at the capital of her country, and this evil dark sisterhood of sorceresses and their minions, a mercenary group, attack the capital. She and her friends have to escape, and along the way she ends up picking up this powerful sword and becoming the champion of her country.
So adventure-esque. There's a lot of the little stops around here and they learn all sorts of cool things.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty much how I'm running my game as well. A lot of moving around, kind of the world building. How is it a pretty long fantasy or is it a novella kind of like your science fiction?
They're meant for young adults, so I tried to stick to about 70,000 words for each of the books in the trilogy.
Cool.
But yeah, it did get complicated because I had to get the characters from one place to another. So an interesting thing is, even though it's a fantasy series, I did research on how long it would take to ride a horse from one place to another, because I had this idea in my head about how far the distances were in between countries and around different places. And then the whole reason, this is kind of sad to say, but the whole reason there are griffins in the story is because I decided they had to get somewhere faster than they can get to on horseback. So actually, I'm glad I have griffins in the story, but honestly, that's where they came from, is the need for transportation that I thought would be faster, or at least different than horseback or on a sailboat. So
that is awesome. I love how some little quirks like that or details jump in. You're like, I love that they added this. And you're like, yeah, the reason I did this because I was being lazy and did not want to talk about how long it was going to take to be on a horse.
yeah.
I had a lot to do, and that's just one less thing I had to worry about.
Yes.
It's so great. That's so great. So when you were younger, what's one of your I guess maybe nowadays that you're adult, what's one of your favorite childhood books? I know you mentioned The Hobbit. Was there other ones that, was a proponent to you becoming an avid reader / writer?
I would say I read a lot of different things. I mean, I read the Black Stallion series and the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, and even though those aren't fantasy, I think the family parts of that and those types of things kind of informed my writing. Again, a lot of fairy tales, a lot of Piers Anthony was really popular for a little while and I don't know that I would recommend I shouldn't say that, but anyway, but yeah, really popular for a while and with my friends. And then I read a lot of Mercedes Lackey in college, and I read pretty well anything I get my hands on. So it was kind of like whatever I could find. And then I like really young childhood books still that I still reread. I love The Hungry Caterpillar, even though I know it's meant for like preschoolers. I still love that book. And when my daughters were growing up, I read alongside them, and I kept finding more and more books that I wish I'd known about when I was younger, or I wish had been around.
Yeah.
Like I really like Jessica Day George and her Dragon Slipper series. I like Scott Rankin and his Ash Lords duology. Like there's so many good books.
Yeah.
For young readers right now.
There's so many books everywhere, and it kills me to say I won't be able to get to read hardly any of them. A small fraction of them I'll get to read. But so that no one misses out on your books, where can we find and get copies of your books?
Well, they can be found on Amazon, and they can be ordered at Invitation Bookshop in Gig Harbor. They can be found at Barnes & Noble, and I think just about most of the places that sell books online. I upload to an ebook distribution place.
Okay. Awesome. And any place we can get them signed from you?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you show up at barbecue to you at certain times, I'll be there. And I'm also going to be at the Garden Poetry Festival at Lakewold Gardens. That's in February though. And I will probably be around at different Greater Gig Harbor Literary Society events.
Awesome. Well, hopefully I can meet you in person and we can do more chatting and exchanging pleasantries and maybe
Yeah.
even books too, because I love having more books. I need to read. I have a bunch I need to read still, but it's always nice to have them there. They keep me
Yes.
company, and they keep
Yep.
all of us company. Well, Tyrean, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you just taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me. Yeah, just thanks for showing up and having a conversation with me.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate this. It's awesome.
Nope, my pleasure. It's fun to help promote others who are doing the hard task of writing stories that, manifest in our brains. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
people
It
can
is
get out there,
good to
what's
meet
that?
other authors. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. Like I said, my pleasure too. I love this stuff. So everybody go get some good science fiction. Heck, go way back and grab some fantasy too, from all the different websites. Read her stuff, and maybe when you see her out and about in town, you can get her to sign it. That'd be really cool too. But for us here, hope you have a great day and keep reading, everybody. Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.